Yeah.
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 Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go. Should we go into one of our segments?
Sure.
How about we get into a little bit of our concept of the day?
Yeah, since it kind of goes along with, it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about with sensitive people, because the concept of the day is basic. They're actually, I picked 3 this time because this is what we do in sensitive people. And so I figured since Lisa was in sensitive people, it might make sense to talk about this. But basically, so basically the 3 concepts are grounded scenes, which Lisa kind of just mentioned when she was talking about the deconstruction. So we'll get into that. And then character based scenes, and then absurd scenes, which she also mentioned with the deconstruction. So grounded, and I kind of grabbed here and there from the internet. So don't take these too heavily, people, as official definitions, but I think they match. So this one is from a site called Collaborative Improv, in their glossary of terms for grounded. So it says grounded refers to a degree of realism and practicality. When we play grounded scenes or characters, we are not looking to be extreme or absurd. Instead, we play and perform in a typical situation. This does not mean everything has to be happy. Instead, it means we play real. The emotions, actions, and responses are those we might actually encounter in life, and not exaggerated for the sake of exaggeration. Do you guys feel like, does that sound like should we add or take away from that definition, or does that sound pretty much right?
Yeah, I mean, I think grounded is, in my head, it's kind of like a baseline of like, hey, this is normality in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
kind of creating a baseline.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess I'll go through the 3 of them, and then we can come back and discuss. So that's grounded, and then this other definition, it wasn't really a definition, it was like a description taken from Hoopla. And we'll put all these links in our show notes. So character has to do with point of view, voice, background, mental state, physical behavior, status, you name it. So taking something or a couple of those things and creating a character. And really, I think point of view is a big one, really, but also, taking a physicality or a way that you speak. Sometimes people, if they're brave, do accents. And just making that the character. So a little bit less grounded, because now you're kind of being a little bit more off the wall than just sort of a more real reactionary person, as if you were just in real life. And then finally we have absurd. And I took this definition from What is Absurd Humor? Your Guide to Surreal Comedy, from a site called Witty Companion. And it says absurd humor or surreal comedy is the type of humor that revolves around illogical situations, behaviors, and absurd characters that make you laugh simply because they are ridiculous and unexpected. So there we have it, grounded, character, and absurd. And the reason why, like I said before, I chose this is because kind of a little bit recently with sensitive people, because the way that we do a format called the living room, and basically, like you guys mentioned before, as we start off, like Jess was saying, is we start storytelling, telling true stories just about our lives, just as who we are. And then we do scenes inspired both by those stories. And then we do those in 3 beats. So we do 3 scenes, we tell stories, we do 3 scenes, we come back, we tell more stories, we do 3 scenes, we come back and tell stories, and then do 3 scenes. So 3 beats. And what we kind of decided to do as a group one day, with the help of our coach, Jason Sarna, who's been on season 1, by the way, should check that out, is he suggested, like, well, why don't we try to do the first beat as grounded scenes, the second beat as character scenes, and then the third beat absurd scenes. So it kind of has this, gradual build up from sort of grounded to kind of to the ridiculous. So anyways, I want to hear you guys' thoughts about what is grounded or character or absurd mean to you, or what do you guys think?
Well, when I think grounded, which is my preferred style, I always think of when my mom was dying and she had cancer that had metastasized to her brain, and she was doing some very loopy things that were hilarious.
Oh.
And just the kind of conversations you have. And I always remember one time when we were just sitting and doing embroidery. This wouldn't play on stage, but because we were trying to think of things to do, and her brain was no longer telling her like where the canvas was, and so she was embroidering like a sock or something, and the sock was attached to the embroidery, and it sounds very plain, but it was kind of hilarious to watch this, and especially to watch how intently she was trying to do it right,
Yeah.
Right.
So are you saying that kind of went into absurd, or?
No, I mean, it was all just what she was doing, but the way life is really funny. Another time I took her to like an ice cream place, and she was still able to walk and talk and so on. So people couldn't tell that she was really sick. And then as we were leaving, there was a big tip jar there, and she just took it and walked off with it, which is of course not something anyone in their right mind would do. But in her mind, it was like, oh, I forgot this, or
right.
But it was just hilarious. And their reaction to seeing this happen.
Right. So
what do we do? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that a mistake that a lot of like first level improvisers make is assuming that funny has to be absurd. And there is a hilarity sometimes in just reality and the way that things actually play out. I remember my experience of level one, I had, I think, 2 actual stand-up comedians in there, and then a couple guys who fancied themselves hilarious. And there would be a lot of scenes with this absurdity in it. And I felt like I had to match that absurd energy, even though I didn't feel so. It took a lot of energy because I felt like I had to become absurd to be as hilarious as these stand-up comics were. And I feel I failed a lot in that because that's not my natural state. I'm actually a pretty grounded person. And when I started playing to my strengths, which was that grounded character, those grounded characters, it became a lot more funny, and I made their characters more funny because I gave them something to compare their absurdity to. And sometimes if I was in a scene with another grounded player, that would be fine. You don't have to have that contrast because, like you said, sometimes basic life can be funny if you're pulling out those small things that people don't normally notice, like we were talking about earlier.
Well, your children probably make you laugh all the time.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
The way they see things or what they say.
Right.
Well, and that's what I love about and that's another example too, but your example with your mom when she was ill, and she was playing her life as if that was reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was, for her, that made sense to her, and she treated it as such. It wasn't something ridiculous. And I think that that's what grounded is. It could be it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to not do things that are ridiculous. You could do things, but I think it means you treat them as if that were reality. And there's no like, you're just like, that's, you treat it as a matter of fact thing that's happening. And I mean, I struggle the most with, Lisa knows this, I struggle the most with grounded because I am that I always want to go up there. And I really appreciated especially Jason's coaching of really showing us and having us do exercises where it's like, it's really getting myself to really understand what grounded means. And I actually really enjoy grounded scenes much more now. And I think that they can be some of the most successful scenes. Like you said, Jess, like it's not about being the ham or finding the funny. I mean, it's okay to find, like, if a line comes to you that's funny, that's fine. But it's just having those real reactions. It's weird too. Like for me, it's like, oh, you just play yourself on stage. Like that's such a foreign concept for me because like a lot of actors, I think it's like it feels safer for some people to play other people that are so different from themselves because you feel less vulnerable. But I think that some of the best performances I've had that I've surprised myself are in grounded scenes. I'm like, oh, I can do that, So
I remember in my level 1, there was someone who liked to have scenes where there were, drugs or, lots of sex or something like that going on. And at that point I was like, yes. And so, yeah, and
I'll have sex with you. Wait, what?
Wait,
you and your brother. Yeah. And which is fine, which is fine, but I didn't understand that you're saying yes to the reality of the scene. And you could also, not that I would be speaking as myself, but there would also be funny, in the situation where you have a roommate that is like anything goes and another roommate that's like, I have work at 6. Could you keep your groans down or whatever? I don't know.
Right. So it's not always that you have to agree with the actual words that are coming out of the other person's mouth to be grounded. It's that you have to agree with the point of view of your character. So I think that's where character comes in. You have that grounded of, okay, this is the status quo, but you take it to the next step, which is character. And now you're talking about point of view, which if you want to know more about point of view, you can go back and listen to Courtney Ropp's podcast in season 1. She talked a lot about point of view and character. And it really is about agreeing with who you are as a character and what you've already established. So it's not always yes and to the last thing they said. It's yes and to the reality that you've created in that grounded part of the scene. And then from there, you can heighten it. So you kind of need that grounded place to be able to heighten it. And then once you introduce character, that's kind of like the color of the scene. What do they say? Mental state, physical behavior, status. Like I think character is just like, not so much, oh, reality, we agree, but like, oh, this is who I am. And agreeing with that I feel that's like an elevation from grounded a little bit. And then
I think really, from my understanding or my experience with it and the people that I, like, again, Jason Sarna talks about it. And maybe, Lisa, maybe you can talk about, because you said at some point you talked about one of the first workshops or something you took, right? Was about character?
Oh, character and just sort of vomiting out opinions and just having opinions about everything. Yes.
Yeah. And so, right there too, it's really about point of view. And holding on. So I think just like what you're saying, it's like you're holding on to that point of view is that grounded part of it, but it also kind of leans to the absurd or starts to go there because you're like a character. So you can kind of be a little more silly or goofy or a little not as real, let's say, I don't know. But and your point of view can be anything like, I want cake. That could be a point of view. And the whole time you're in the scene, that's all you want. Your character just wants cake. And, that just plays out. And to me, what I've witnessed is the more the character holds onto their point of view, usually the funnier it is, and if all the characters,
Right. Yeah. I know I'm bleeding out. Yeah. I know I need to go to the hospital, but do they have cake there?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, will the cake stop? Maybe the cake will stop the bleeding. Like, I know I need cake. Like it's not necessarily denying, I mean, I guess it is denial to a certain degree, but denial that's in, truth to you, to who you are and what your point of view is.
Well, and Jason has done such a good job of coaching us on those two types of things. With the grounded scenes, he wants us to come out, not start talking right away, but to start doing some object work and notice what's going on there. And then when it's the characters, he'll often just say, no, what was your choice? That first choice, like, I'm cold. Well, then heighten that, or I want cake. And you want,
yeah. What does he say? He says, choose some. He has like a very concise. He says, choose something, observe what you did, and then continue that and try to heighten it. I feel like it's something around those lines is what he says.
Yeah.
So how do you guys, Lisa, how do you feel about, like, say you came in at the beginning of the scene and you made a pretty bold statement, like, oh, I'm cold. And nobody really listened to that. And that was like, it was totally brushed over. Nobody yes-anded it. But you felt like that was a major point of view of your character. Would you hang on to that? Like, a lot of times, like, I'm like, oh, well, that's gone. Like, my idea is gone. How would you bring that back? And would you bring that back?
Yeah. If I were doing my best work, I would do it back, do it again and repeat it, and be doing it in the background, shivering while you're doing something, absolutely. Right. I think that would be very funny because the audience would notice I did it, even if you literally used the other didn't or your character didn't. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question though, because it's a bit more challenging if somebody doesn't listen or acknowledge that point of view. Then you are kind of left out in the cold.
But even if your scene partner doesn't yes-and you still have a responsibility to yes-and yourself. And I think,
I think it can still be funny. And the hope is that your scene partner, you do it enough and you heighten it enough, they they'll relent to, like, oh, you're cold.
Right.
Or whatever. Like, do you need a coat?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Right, exactly. Challenges. The first step, Jason says, well, not, first he says, do something and then notice what you did. What did you do anyway? And did you do like 3 things? Because you probably aren't going to keep track of all of them. So don't give too much at a time. Just one thing, or
simple is better. Yeah.
And it could be also just, we've played it too, where it's like, it could be a mannerism. It could be a way of walking. It could be, a way of talking. It could be a high voice or a low voice. And he's really good about asking us, like, if you talk like this, well, what kind of character are you? You kind of sound like John Wayne. So now that gives you something. You don't, like, we're talking about trying to have ideas before you get on stage. That is such a simple thing. I remember hearing that advice and I was like, oh my God, that just like blew my mind, and it's going to make my improvising that much easier and better by doing that little trick of just doing something with your voice. And that helps you, or mannerism, whatever. Now you know who you are as a character. Mm-hmm. You kind of lean into that, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm this person.
So you guys have both studied clowning. So you have that character point of view. What brings it up to that absurdity level? How do you heighten
clowning?
Absurdity? Well, for clowning or just, clowning uses absurdity a lot, but in an improv sense, what takes it up to that next level of absurdity?
For me, I don't think of clowning as absurdity so much as failure, winning, losing, stakes. So for me, my current shortcut thought is that improv freed me from worrying about mistakes, and clowning made me embrace winning and losing and be like, they're all fun. They're so fun. And Chad really pulled that off in a workshop he did with us, where he would just arbitrarily say, oh, you lost, you're over in this team. you won, you're the hero now. Oh, wait. Oh, now you've done something ridiculous wrong. And you are now the worst of the worst. And you know, name all these different clusters of people that would be throughout the workshop space. You're now the leaders. You're the supreme leaders. You're in the gutter of shame. You know,
right. It's interesting how absurdity kind of takes maybe emotions that you might have about rejection and makes them okay. Because, okay, I was rejected because, you know, my hair was bigger than yours, or I was rejected because I, you know, had a sandwich for lunch, you know, like it's stuff that doesn't matter, then I always try and turn it into something existential, but maybe it's not.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think, and I would say that there can be a degree of absurdity. It's kind of a nebulous word. I feel like people have maybe their own definition and experience with what absurdity is, and what absurd comedy is. But I think for me too, I think there is a bit of a connection between clowning and absurdity, because there's this freedom to do whatever, you know, like anything kind of counts, and it's, you know, ridiculous, and trying to put meaning on this ridiculousness, you know, kind of like you're describing, Lisa, where, you know, there's no real rules, you know, it's this silly construct of rules that is kind of absurd.
Right.
But I was going to say too, like our last beat of sensitive people when we do the living room format is absurdity. And sometimes, or a lot of times, those can be the most fun scenes. They can also be, as players, sometimes we're like, what are we doing? You know, we kind of get in our heads and get judgy about it, I think. And then we're like, what the hell was that? But it can be also very, you know, because you can just go out there and do anything. And so you really don't have to have a plan, and you don't have to say something smart. You know, you're just, I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't really figured out what our absurd scenes are in sensitive people yet. Absurd is the one I struggle with the most. But they're almost always very short.
Yeah.
They almost always have multiple people on stage grunting and
yeah, it's always an interesting stage picture, I guess I would say. And it's and lots of times, I don't know, sometimes it can be really cool, and get sometimes the most laughs too. And I'm with you, Lisa. I'm still trying to figure it out, and but it's fun.
I think the word that stands out to me in this definition of absurdity that we read to you was, it's ridiculous, but also unexpected. So sometimes it doesn't mean that it's like, oh, I'm a crazy person acting crazy. You know, sometimes it means it's just something that's unexpected for that situation. You know, like, you know, super fit person who's been, you know, teaching the fitness class and giving all these fitness lessons to everybody, goes to lunch in you know, the last scene with somebody, and they're eating a giant cake while, you know, the person who was laying on the couch all day is eating a salad, you know, like it's unexpected, you know, and that's what makes it funny or absurd or weird or I don't know.
I think what was I gonna say? I think it's well, the way I think we've talked about this with sensitive people, like it wouldn't work if we started out with absurd scenes, because it would be too much like it would be too much nonsensical stuff to start off, and people would be like, what is this? But since we start with grounded and then we go to character and then it ends on absurd. And am I going in and out right now? I can tell my screen is being weird. Sorry. Sorry, people. But we start with grounded character and then we end with absurd. So we've kind of gained the audience's trust so that at the very end, we can kind of get away with being a little more, ridiculous and weird and avant-garde.
Right.
Anyways, yeah.